Hi, if you want to watch exclusive content with hot girls that you won't watch on YouTube, namely where Naruto roasts Kushina and Mikoto and many other hot girls without restrictions, then visit my Boosty channel at the link in the description.
He hadn't expected to hear such news. And who would be happy to hear that you're dying? It seemed untrue, since Naruto had believed he should live at least until he was an old man. But no, he wasn't destined to live to such a ripe old age. And he still had so much left to do. Sasuke hadn't yet been returned to the village. Uzumaki hadn't yet achieved the Hokage title. His greatest dream was slipping away from under him, slipping away to a place where it would never come true. Everything was beginning to crumble like a house of cards. The world had taken on a darker hue. And yet, everything had only just begun well. The Jinchuriki had achieved recognition from the village. The battle with Pain had shown that the blonde didn't want destruction. He wasn't a demon fox, but an ordinary guy who cared about his village and loved it. Everything he'd achieved lost all meaning. It became so unimportant. Uzumaki still pretended to his friends that everything was fine. He never told anyone about it. He simply couldn't. He even forbade Bachan from telling him, as he didn't want anyone else to know. It was a secret between him and the Hokage. Even his closest friends didn't know, even those closest to him. Iruka. He couldn't tell his teacher that he only had a short time left to live. No, Tsunade hadn't given him a date, but Uzumaki himself knew he didn't have much time left. Time was running out on him. The first time it happened was when they went to the Land of Iron to talk to Killer Bee's brother. But he wouldn't even listen to the blonde. Back in the village, Naruto felt pain in his heart for the first time. The pain spread throughout his body, making it hard to breathe, and Naruto simply fell to the ground, his legs giving way. He lost consciousness and didn't wake up until evening. But back then, everyone assumed it was simply stress caused by the long journey and the news about Sasuke. Everyone understood that Naruto was trying hard, even sparing himself. And Naruto. He already sensed something was wrong, but kept quiet, deciding later to go with Tsunade. She could dispel any doubts. Even Uzumaki believed he was well protected. The fox always protected him, whether from illness or from enemies. The blonde knew he never got sick, because he had an immunity that was somehow linked to the Kyuubi. Upon returning to the village, Naruto visited the Hokage, who confirmed his suspicions and delivered the devastating news. Uzumaki had a weak heart that couldn't handle the strain. Naruto had indeed neglected his health, preferring to train, take on missions, and search for his friend. This took a lot of time and effort, but he spared no effort. And now the result was clear. The fox's heart couldn't protect itself, and it had ended up in this condition. Bachan, don't tell anyone about this. The blonde looked at the woman pleadingly. They can't find out about this. This is my problem, and I have to solve it. Do you even understand, Naruto, that they're your friends and should know? The Hokage was angry, but she held back, clenching her fists tighter and harder, digging her nails into her skin. Think about them. How will they feel when it's too late? You have to tell them, she said, demanding and commanding. No, I won't. It will be easier for them not to know about it, he said affirmatively. Uzumaki wasn't going to back down. Okay, she sighed, but know that I won't be able to keep silent for long. They'll find out anyway, but only under different circumstances. I'll leave this conversation for now, but we'll come back to it later. Resignedly, Tsunade didn't know what to do. She didn't want to remain silent, but she couldn't disobey the boy either, since that was his decision. She had no right to reveal his secret. Right now, I'd advise you to try less, but knowing you, you won't listen to me. Bachan, I haven't brought Sasuke back yet, and I haven't become Hokage yet, so I don't have time to sit around. A smile, not as bright as before, a forced one. It seemed Naruto himself didn't believe that everything could be as he wanted. He no longer believed his own words, but he continued to repeat them, trying to grasp at straws. He wanted to live, and his dreams and aspirations were a good incentive. I have to bring Sasuke back. The truth was already deep inside. At least I have to do this. A sigh. He has to come back. Okay, I'll go home. I need to. It doesn't matter. Okay, go. Just come see me every Tuesday. I want to keep an eye on your illness. Okay? The woman's voice quieted slightly, the commanding tone vanishing, but concern was building. Okay. See you tomorrow, Bachan. He turned and opened the door. Could you send someone to find Sasuke? I need to start searching. But there are no leads. Yes, I'll do something. Naruto had no doubt that the Hokage would help him. She had always been by his side, helping and protecting him. That's good. Then see you tomorrow, since I'm about to take on a mission. I need it. He left the room, closing the door behind him. He didn't even listen to the Hokage's words. He simply couldn't stand being in the office. Only when he was home was the Jinchuriki able to sink to the floor, his back against the door. The realization of what had happened hit him with renewed force. He understood what had truly happened. Closing his eyes, he rested his head on his knees and tried to calm himself. Naruto realized he had already decided everything in Tsunade's office. He just needed to acknowledge it. He would bring Sasuke back, and then let it be. He had never been afraid of death. The main thing was not to lose himself. The boy didn't know that this news would change his life forever. Nothing would ever be the same again. And meeting Sasuke would be just around the corner, just as he'd hoped. A week passed after that incident in the Hokage's office. Naruto kept coming to Tsunade for news of Sasuke, but the woman only shrugged and spread her arms. Nothing had happened. This didn't even upset the boy, as he understood that the Uchiha himself didn't want anyone to know his whereabouts. And now that he was in Akatsuki, finding him was truly impossible. Naruto didn't give up, although for some reason he felt like their meeting would happen soon. Perhaps a premonition had awakened within him, though he hadn't experienced anything like it before. Overall, Naruto was filled with anticipation. He understood that bringing his friend back to the village was impossible, because until the brunette wanted it with all his heart, it wouldn't happen. And even if the blonde got hurt, it wouldn't change anything. More and more often, Naruto began to wonder if he might no longer want to bring Sasuke back to Konoha, but rather want to talk to him, to clear up the unspoken things that had always lingered in their relationship. They couldn't communicate normally, only teasing and fighting helped. Yes, it helped him understand without words, but it didn't reveal everything. Until a certain point, Naruto hadn't understood what Sasuke was feeling. He didn't know what hatred was. He simply couldn't imagine it. But gradually, everything became clear, experienced, felt. Tired of waiting for news, Naruto asked for a mission, as he couldn't sit still and wasn't used to it. Bachan tried to dissuade him, citing the possibility of an attack at any moment. But Naruto wouldn't listen, knowing that if he stayed there for even another week, he'd wither away from boredom. Tsunade offered simple missions, but Naruto declined, claiming they weren't for him, as he was already capable of taking on high-ranking missions. The hero of Konoha couldn't remain in the village and carry out menial tasks. The Jinchuriki felt like he might end up locked away in the village. The woman was finally forced to give in to Naruto's stubborn pressure. The blonde hadn't changed, remaining the same persistent, stubborn, and determined man. Yet, the Hokage noticed a glimmer of sadness in his gaze. He was slowly changing, becoming calmer and more reserved, though he still pretended to be normal in front of his friends. Only a few noticed the changes, but each drew their own conclusions, none of which corresponded to reality. Uzumaki never told anyone about his illness. Kakashi was the captain, personally requested by Tsunade. She didn't give him all the details, but asked him to keep an eye on Naruto and make sure nothing happened to him. Hatake didn't understand the purpose, but he kept quiet, still remembering his Umbu training. Only the two of them were going on the mission, though Tsunade insisted on Sakura, who was needed at the hospital. Only the two of them had to go. Their route began at the Konoha gates, where Uzumaki and Hitaki were supposed to meet. Adjusting the strap of his backpack, Naruto lowered his hand and hurried out of the house. Striding confidently down the street, the boy walked toward the gate, not even scanning the area. He had seen it all for a long time. It was all familiar since childhood. Uzumaki was thoughtful, as if something was bothering him. He didn't smile as usual, but looked only at his feet, occasionally frowning. Only after reaching the guard post did the blonde perk up and smile at the guards. He needed to continue showing the usual Uzumaki Naruto, unfazed by anything. The Jinchuriki didn't even notice Kakashi watching him, taking note of something. He had long noticed the changes in the boy, but had never had the time to ask. Rising from the branch, the man leaped silently and hurried over to his student, who was pretending to look for the captain. "You're late, Kakashi-sensei," the blonde said as loudly as he could. The man merely shrugged, grinning. This was their tradition, repeated every time. Everyone already knew the answer to Hitaki's whereabouts, but they preferred to move on to their own version. "I met a granny who urgently needed my help," the former Umbu member replied habitually. "That's not true." A smile that looked so much like normal. "What's our mission, Kakashi-sensei?" Naruto tried to continue the conversation. They had just left the village and were already heading toward the forest, beginning their journey. Leaping onto the first branch, Naruto began listening to the mission, occasionally asking his teacher to repeat it. He was genuinely curious about the mission the Hokage had given them, something he hadn't noticed before. Kakashi chalked it up to Naruto growing older and beginning to understand the gravity of his situation and the world at large. After briefly explaining that they were to deliver a scroll with important information to the Land of Waves, Kakashi fell silent. They continued on their way, only occasionally hearing an exclamation or question from Naruto's lips. It was as if he were somewhere else, just a shell of himself, still moving. In fact, that was almost it. Naruto had been communicating with the fox for some time now, and for some reason, the fox had decided to communicate. This had happened before, but only when his Jinchuriki was in danger. Now, he deigned to open his eyes to say a few words. He didn't reveal anything new, but Uzumaki noticed that the Kyuubi was looking at him differently, either with pity or concern. But the blonde still thought he might have imagined it all. Having emerged from his consciousness, Naruto looked around. They had already left the outskirts of Konoha, and now the landscape had changed. There were fewer trees, so they had to descend to continue on the ground. Kakashi was silent, as if he hadn't even been there. The blonde noticed his teacher looking at him sideways. A thoughtful look was creeping into his gaze, as if he were working through some difficult task. The blonde realized that Hitaki had already noticed the change in his personality and behavior, but he was in no hurry to say so. It was as if he were afraid, but that wasn't true. The Jinchuriki didn't want anyone to worry about him, but perhaps he wouldn't be able to hide the truth after all. Uzumaki didn't immediately notice the enemy shinobi. Only after Kakashi parried the first blows did he rush into battle. Drawing a kunai, he threw it at the first enemy, who deftly dodged, but that wasn't surprising. Their employers had ensured that their shinobi were trained. Shaking his head, Naruto folded his arms and summoned several shadow clones, sending them toward the enemy. There were about 4 of them in total, but they deftly parried the attacks. While the clones were disappearing, Naruto managed to summon a couple more, sending them even further, this time along with Rasengan. Less than a minute later, the shadow clones were defeated, though only 2 opponents remained. Kakashi killed one, and one of the clones grazed the other. Sighing, Uzumaki drew another kunai and rushed into battle, trying to catch the man whose face was hidden behind a mask. Only through the slits could one see his eyes. But he deftly dodged, managing to strike with his dagger. The shinobi managed to catch the blonde a couple of times, in the chest, and another in the face. Hissing in pain, Naruto took a couple of steps back to regroup. But then he stopped, swaying slightly. Poisoned. That was the first thing that came to the Jinchuriki's mind, and he was right. Everything swam before his eyes, and the enemy's silhouette became indistinct. Closing his eyes for literally 2 minutes, the blonde tried to pull himself together. He hadn't expected this was exactly what they would do. It was too dirty and wrong. But who would judge them? After all, everyone has their own methods of achieving their goals. The fact that everything was swimming was nothing, but the fact that his heart began to beat faster already aroused suspicion. Uzumaki still remembered how it had happened the first time, when his heart decided to speak out. Now the same thing was happening, and something had to be done. Opening his eyes, Naruto tried to focus his gaze on the enemy. He took deep breaths, trying to calm himself. But his heart continued to clench, sending gentle waves of pain through his body. Gritting his teeth, Uzumaki adjusted his grip on his weapon and lunged at the masked man. The Jinchuriki had already noticed that Kakashi had long since been pulled away, trying to separate them. It was a smart move. Taking a step, swaying slightly, the blonde parried the first dagger strike, dodging the next one. It was difficult, as the boy staggered, and the pain in his chest intensified. Uzumaki didn't notice the kick that caught him in the ribs and flew back toward a tree, hitting his back against the trunk. The world spun even more, and Naruto couldn't immediately focus. After all, it was his own fault for underestimating the enemy and not using stronger techniques. Opening his eyes, the boy saw a silhouette towering over him. Uzumaki tried to sit up, but a sharp pain stopped him. After taking a couple of breaths and biting his lip, the blonde looked up at the man and stared at him. Something was wrong. The man didn't look like the masked man. That one had been a huge brute, while this one was stately. Trying to focus his gaze again, Naruto exhaled sharply. He realized who stood before him. "And you, Dobe, as I see, have become even weaker." A smirk appeared on the brunette's face as he looked intently at his former friend. "You can't handle a weakling anymore." Naruto couldn't believe his friend was standing before him. Sasuke hadn't changed in appearance since their last meeting. His gaze, however, had changed, becoming even more self-assured, and one could see the hatred the brunette no longer hid from those around him. But he remained as cold as ever and showed no emotion. All that could be seen on his face was a crooked smile, more like a smirk. A reserved, self-assured man, certain he always does the right thing. If it weren't for the pain, Naruto would have quickly found a response to the Uchiha's taunt. But now the blonde was trying harder to pretend he was fine, that he'd simply sat down to rest. At least, that's what he thought he was doing. He couldn't see himself from the outside, and that slightly upset him. The Uzumaki couldn't know what he really looked like now. Perhaps everything had already become clear to Sasuke too, but looking at him, it was impossible to discern anything. The Uchiha was good at hiding all emotions. "Sasuke? What are you doing here?" He tried to sound surprised, as he'd forgotten how to be surprised by anything. It's just that when you already know you're not going to last, you have time to realize and understand a lot. "Have you come for me?" For some reason, this option seemed preferable. And it wasn't just that Naruto wanted it. No, on the contrary, he had no desire to follow his friend anywhere. The Jinchuriki simply wanted to talk to the brunette, and returning him to the village wasn't even a thought, as he knew he'd missed his chance. Nothing could be done now. Naruto simply realized the Uchiha had come for him, as the Bija was in the Uzumaki's body. Akatsuki had almost completely collected everything, leaving only the Kyuubi and one other person, but the blonde knew nothing about it. Naruto knew he had to get up, as he didn't want to appear weak to anyone, especially not to Sasuke. He couldn't give in to his eternal rival, friend, and comrade and be weak. Not around him. But no matter how confidently he tried to rise, the pain wouldn't let him, as it grew stronger, producing only a sharp tingling sensation, and he couldn't breathe. He had to breathe alternately through his mouth and nose. Shaking his head, Naruto continued to look at Sasuke, not wanting to lose eye contact. What if this was their last meeting? He wanted to remember his friend well before he died. There was no response from the missing Nin, though something else had happened. While Naruto was struggling to stand, Kakashi appeared, looking unharmed. He clearly dispatched his opponent quickly and decided to assist the blonde. The copy ninja acted as if he hadn't noticed the brunette and hurried over to the Jinchuriki. Crouching down, he leaned closer to Uzumaki and studied him intently, lifting his headband as he did so. It was as if he was trying to see something in the boy sitting across from him with his Sharingan. Naruto stopped trying to get up, turned his gaze to his sensei in surprise, and leaned back slightly, nearly howling in pain. It truly was strange to look at his teacher so closely. Swallowing, the Jinchuriki tried to calm himself again, lest he reveal himself. He knew Kakashi-sensei was noticing everything. "Did Tsunade give you anything?" Hataki broke the silence. Naruto gasped, as he understood the teacher the first time. Looking over to where the Uchiha had been standing, he saw that he was still there, listening intently and watching the two of them. "I don't understand what you're talking about, Kakashi-sensei." He looked at the copy ninja again. Naruto tried to look like a fool, since no one should know his truth. "Naruto," he said with a hint of disappointment, "why are you lying? You're only making things worse for yourself, and I want to help." The gray-haired man filled Uzumaki with shame. He knew he shouldn't have done that either, but he still decided to follow his path, although the next question threw him off balance. "How much longer do you have?" A lump formed in his throat, but he had to answer. He had to refute Hataki's words. "Kakashi-sensei, you've completely confused me. What are you even talking about?" He smiled, but it was so forced he wanted to wipe it off his face. Naruto had never smiled like that before, and everyone here knew it. Even Sasuke came closer, though he remained just as unapproachable and reserved. It didn't matter anymore. He only wanted to take with him the truth about himself and how bad things were now. Naruto understood that if he didn't show that he was okay now, everyone would soon find out. Clenching his fists, he shook his head and tilted it down, trying to hide his gaze. It was becoming increasingly difficult to breathe. An invisible vice gripped his heart. Raising his gaze slightly, the Jinchuriki glanced sideways at his friends and grinned. They were terrified. Even Sasuke now seemed confused, as if he finally understood what was going on. Yes, he still had to say it. But before he could say anything, the Uchiha interrupted him. "You're coming with me!" He collected himself again, as if he weren't the lost boy whose toy was about to be taken away. The thought made him want to laugh, but the blonde only bit his lip, raising his head again to look into the dark, almost black eyes. "Naruto won't go anywhere with you, Sasuke." Kakashi didn't even look at his former student, his attention only drawn to the boy standing across from him. "He's going with me to Konoha, where he'll receive treatment. I'm sure Tsunade knows about your illness, but she won't tell you because you asked her to." The last words were aimed at Uzumaki, who seemed oblivious to everyone else. He seemed to have detached himself from everything, trying to cope with his problem. It was obvious he was in pain, but he still pretended everything was fine. It seemed like he wasn't listening, but that wasn't true. Naruto glanced from one to the other in surprise. He even managed a quiet laugh. He didn't understand the point of this division, since Naruto had already decided that he would live a life of peace and, accordingly, do what he wanted. As he always did, nothing had changed. "Honestly, if it comes down to it, Kakashi-sensei, I don't care anymore what happens to me." The blonde raised his hand and clutched his jacket, feeling pain in that area. Yes, that's where his heart ached, the one that would soon stop. "I don't know how long I have left, but Bachan said my attacks would finish me off. How many there will be, I can't know, and I don't want to. I've resigned myself to it." Then he bowed his head and glanced sideways at the teacher. "I just ask you not to tell anyone, that's what I've decided. No one must know." The pain was fading, although it still lingered. Sighing, Uzumaki, clenching his teeth, there was no point in hiding it, began to stand. His head was spinning, and he felt slightly nauseous, but the blonde stubbornly stood, ignoring the pain. That's it, enough, he won't be weak. That was his motivation. As long as he lived, that was how long he had to live. Straightening his back, Naruto stood up to his full height. Taking a couple of deep breaths, he takes a step, but then he sways to the side. He manages to stop himself from falling. He looks at his friend and teacher and notices their tense expressions. But why is Sasuke so wary? He should exude only coldness, but no, he's watching the Jinchuriki. Strange. The blonde takes a step and then realizes he won't make it. Darkness rolls over him, and the boy begins to lose consciousness. His body begins to fall, and Uzumaki so wanted to approach the Uchiha to say a few words. Say goodbye? Perhaps. But now that was impossible. The saving darkness was rolling in, bringing peace and silence. The last thing the boy saw were Sasuke's hands and his troubled face. Naruto! Hatake and Sasuke say simultaneously, and then darkness. It was all over so quickly. Sasuke had no intention of returning to the village. There were so many unnecessary memories of a place he'd never felt at home in. Yes, he'd been lying to himself, realizing that Konoha had been his home as a child. After all, he'd had a family back then, a clan. But what now? He knew the place where his clan's homes had once been had been simply destroyed. Like the entire village, attacked by pain, who'd so easily lost to the Uzumaki. The blonde had truly grown stronger, something that couldn't go unnoticed. Even after so many days, weeks, or even months, Sasuke saw the difference in his friend, or rather, his former friend. The Uchiha had severed all the ties that bound him to his friends, who to him had never seemed close. He hated these ties that people like to tie themselves to so as not to seem lonely. It was so pathetic of them to do so. People are stupid, of which the brunette was fully convinced. Meeting Naruto was as much of a surprise to him as it was to Uzumaki. At least, that's what it seemed to the missing Nin when he saw the surprised look in his direction. Still, this dope never changes, remaining trusting and believing in the best, which couldn't possibly be true. Miracles don't happen. Nothing happens if you want it to. And Naruto apparently didn't understand this, and he'd never been smart anyway. Although now it seemed to the Uchiha that the Jinchuriki was deliberately making a fool of himself just to be noticed. This wasn't surprising, since Uzumaki had never known family or human warmth. Did Naruto feel sorry for Sasuke? No, the brunette never pitied anyone. He genuinely didn't care about others, even though as a child he'd wanted to be friends with this restless boy. But then he simply couldn't. His pride wouldn't allow it, and thoughts of Itachi fueled his hatred. Friends were not needed, they were a hindrance. And now the missing Nin was back to the idea of having to return to that damned village. Unable to leave Uzumaki behind. Yes, he could have calmly left, forgetting about the incident, as he always did. He avoided all problems, not thinking about others, because he was more interested only in his own. He didn't want to be dependent on others, believing that was the right thing to do. But something inside him clenched when Kakashi approached Naruto and, crouching down, asked what Sasuke had always been afraid to think about. Naruto was sick. These words weighed heavily on his mind, preventing him from thinking clearly. Outwardly, the brunette was the same, a lifeless mask etched into his face. The Uchiha couldn't believe that this perpetually noisy boy was sick. How could that be? After all, the dobe had promised that they would die together. Why wasn't he striving to do it then? Sasuke was truly confused, having been lied to. And by whom? His best friend, who was always running after him, trying to save him. Kakashi refused to let Uzumaki carry him, saying he wouldn't let the traitor touch Naruto. The Uchiha merely snorted at the remark, but didn't protest. They walked slowly toward Konoha, so as not to cause Naruto any more inconvenience. Sasuke saw the tension in his former teacher's face, but it only amused the missing Nin, as Kakashi never worried about anyone. But as soon as he glanced at Naruto, who now looked more like a doll slung over his back because it was easier, Sasuke's guard returned. He saw the sensei leering at him, but it only irritated him slightly, but not enough to warrant an explanation. It was clear the copy ninja didn't understand why the brunette was following them, but he remained silent. Sasuke, for his part, knew that as soon as he entered the village, he would be captured and tortured. But he didn't care, because there was nothing they could do. He wasn't afraid of pain, because it was always with him. There was the gate, which for some reason remained in place. Sasuke looked around, having never seen Konoha like this. Devastation was everywhere, though the townspeople had already begun to rebuild their homes. This wasn't the village the Uchiha had left. Everything had changed. What had once been, none of it existed anymore. All that remained was rubble, stones, and simply earth. But what was truly astonishing was that not a single resident had died, and in vain. After all, the brunette so hated to see certain faces that evoked only disgust and unnecessary anger. He longed to see the death of these hated people until his teeth gnashed and his fists bled. Sasuke was captured, and Kakashi didn't intercede, which was the right thing to do. The brunette didn't want anyone to pity him or defend him. He had no use for such noble impulses. He was fed up with them. Hissing as his hands were pinned behind his back, he didn't say a word as he walked under guard. He didn't know where they were taking him, but the Uchiha didn't care. He was only interested in one man, the one being carried off in the wrong direction. Sasuke tried to see the boy's yellow head, but as luck would have it, he was quickly led away, not allowing him to inquire about the Jinchuriki's health. Sasuke was tortured with gusto, using various methods and devices, but he remained silent. He had nothing to say to these idiots, who were so stupid they couldn't understand that the brunette wouldn't reveal Akatsuki's plans. He didn't know either, because he was just a pawn being manipulated. The missing nin allowed it because their opponents knew what to press. The truth about Itachi had been revealed, and Konoha had become so hated that he wanted to erase it. He wanted to kill everyone with special zeal, so he could hear their screams, the cracking of bones, their pleas. But that was now a secondary priority. Now, the dobe had to fulfill his promise. After all, he had promised, and that meant the Uchiha would do everything to ensure it. He had to kill the Uzumaki himself, because only he could stop the brunette. Sasuke was sitting at a table again. His gaze fell on his hands, which were bleeding profusely. Several deep cuts, a broken thumb and index finger on both hands. The Uchiha felt no pain, for she had been his faithful companion for many years. He was merely amused by his hands, which were like a mess. He wouldn't be able to hold his Kusanagi for a long time until the wounds healed and his fingers were twisted back into place. But it wasn't just his hands that were damaged. His ribs burned terribly, and he had to breathe slowly and deliberately, as every large gulp of air would get stuck and make him feel more pain than he wanted. A bruise, already turning blue, grazed his cheekbone. His lip was split, and blood was trickling down his forehead, as the missing nin had recently been slammed to the table. For a long time, the brunette's eyes danced with strange things that he didn't bother to examine. That would have been foolish. Only now did Uchiha manage to focus his vision, staring at his hands. It became funny, because the torture was yielding no results. The first chuckle was too quiet, but then his voice gained volume, and the boy's laughter grew even louder. His guards and tormentors stared at him in confusion, wondering why he was so amused. "You can't even get information out of me properly." Sasuke looked with disdain at the two men who were opposite him. "Bastard," the younger one hissed, swinging, but the Uchiha only grinned. He knew he was playing with fire, but he enjoyed it. He felt the pain and could numb it with something else, or rather, he could stop thinking about Uzumaki, who was probably in the hospital right now. "I won't tell you anything, even if you kill me. I don't care." The brunette hisses hatefully, looking at his tormentors from under his bangs. "You only have one way to get me to talk. Seat me next to Uzumaki. Only he can squeeze the truth out of me," the missing nin said ominously, leaning back in his chair. He was offering a lucrative deal, but he wasn't sure they would listen to him. The Uchiha had offered his bet, and it was up to them to decide, those behind the two who had so carefully worked on the brunette's body. Naruto opened his eyes and looked at the ceiling. He wasn't in the forest, which wasn't surprising. Kakashi would never have left his student on the ground, especially if he was sick. There were definitely voices outside the door, but the Jinchuriki wasn't paying any attention. He thought there was someone else in the room, but he wasn't in a hurry to turn his head to confirm his suspicions. And why bother? They could have put him in a room with someone wounded. It didn't matter who was sitting or lying in the next bed, but no, he was mistaken. There was no one next to him. He lay alone in the room. He desperately wanted to see Sasuke, but that wasn't what he needed to think about now. He was beginning to understand more and more that perhaps he no longer wanted to return the Uchiha to a place where he didn't want to be. Hope was fading for those who still believed the young Avenger could still be saved. Their number was dwindling. Even Sakura no longer believed that her beloved could be saved. Only he, Naruto, remained, still believing. But he, too, no longer needed it, for the soon-to-be-dead need nothing. Perhaps he gave up too quickly. But understand, he was tired of fighting. For the most part, he fought this battle for the better alone. He needed support, and he received it. But he felt only crumbs of what they could give him. No, the blonde still loved his friends and teachers, but he wanted to distance himself so they wouldn't feel terrible after his death. He wanted to keep the smiles on their faces, the happiness filling their hearts. The voices outside the door grew louder, making it possible to discern who was speaking and what they were discussing. Kakashi and Bachan were sorting things out. Kakashi was likely inquiring about the blonde's health. The woman denied this, saying it was Naruto's right to divulge such information. She did mention that surgery was possible, but his chances of survival were very low. The copy ninja seemed to ask why Naruto hadn't agreed, if Uzumaki had heard correctly. But the teacher was met with silence. The Hokage must have shrugged or shaken her head. The boy himself wasn't happy about this conversation. He needed to explain the whole situation to the teacher, since he already knew about the illness. Carefully rising, the Jinchuriki felt a dizziness that would likely plague him for a long time. The room was slightly blurry, but he wasn't about to stop. He should have just called them into his room, but for some reason he wanted to walk, to see the faces of such dear people. Even Irika didn't know about the illness. This simple statement sent a shudder through him. No, he definitely couldn't find out about this. After all, he'd had enough in the past. Why ruin his life with such terrible news? Naruto could already imagine how his first teacher and friend would react. Although, most of all, Irika resembled a brother who cared for a slob named Naruto. Grasping the bed with his hands, Uzumaki successfully stood up, trying to feel his weight. But for some reason, his legs trembled, even though they held him up. Straightening up, he slightly misjudged his strength and felt a fog return to his head, and his vision darkened. But after standing there for a few seconds, he opened his eyes again and carefully began moving toward the coveted door that separated him from the speakers. Carefully, step by step, closing the distance, he finally reached his destination and opened it. Kakashi and Tsunade immediately turned to stare at him. Glancing first at their teacher, the blonde noticed that Bachan was starting to get angry, which was understandable. The patient was trying to get out of bed and was breaking his bed rest. Raising his hands, Naruto smiled tensely and tried to reassure the woman. Bachan, you can't hit me. You don't want me to never leave the hospital. In my case, I can't sustain any serious injuries. He knew this ploy would calm the doctor's ardor, as he knew that if he were hit now, he would definitely not be able to stay on his feet. He was already holding onto the doorframe to keep from falling over, or even just to sit up. He didn't want to look weak in front of anyone, even if they were his loved ones. Better to hide it than to receive regrets and looks later that made you shudder, as if you were already a corpse. Although that was indeed the case. Naruto, Why are you standing up? You could have just called out. You heard us. Tsunade managed to calm her ardor, though she didn't let go. In fact, she tightened her grip, her nails digging into his skin. She could see how bad Naruto was feeling, but she kept quiet about it. He was already struggling, and he wanted to deal with his problems on his own, just like he did as a child. Only he'd already forgotten that he wasn't alone, that he was surrounded by people who cared about him. Senju understood that if Naruto did die, which she didn't want to believe, then no one would be as happy as he wanted. Could you please come inside? I want you, Bachan, to tell Kakashi-sensei. No one else can know about this. I'll tell you something related to my illness. Naruto, tearing himself away from the doorway, hurried back inside until he met the eyes of the black sky. Sasuke. You don't even want to tell me about your illness, dope. The Uchiha's voice sounded mocking and reproachful. No, that wasn't possible. Sasuke couldn't have said that, since the brunette doesn't like showing emotions. Perhaps he was just imagining it. Continuing on, the blonde tried to walk straight, not wobble, which was very difficult. His legs didn't want to move, as if they were weighed down like leaves. So he had to hobble as best he could. After a few minutes, though, someone grabbed his hand, helping him. But he didn't want help, so looking at the assistant, who turned out to be Senju, Naruto merely looked at her intently, and she let go of the boy's hand, understanding his thoughts. The Uchiha also entered the room, and to make matters more interesting, he had no guards. But this mattered little to the Uzumaki. He didn't want Sasuke to know the whole truth about his illness. He didn't need it. After all, his revenge would reach its final stage, and there would be no one to hinder him. One obstacle removed, the greater the chance of victory. And Sasuke understood this perfectly well. But then why was he here? Was he trying to make fun of him? Then so be it. The Jinchuriki didn't care anymore. Kakashi-sensei, why is Sasuke here? The blonde sat down on the bed. No, don't tell me. I'm not interested. The main thing is that he won't be here long, and then let him go where his home is. Naruto was sure the Uchiha had come to tease him, to make him want to fulfill his promise. Naruto, he's not leaving because he's been captured. We're fulfilling his demand that he give us information about our enemies. He asked for you to be here. How can I explain this more simply? The copy ninja scratched his head. There was no need to explain, since Naruto already understood everything. And you think he'll do it? The blonde glanced sideways at his friend. Nothing personal, but I know how much you dislike Konoha. I don't want you to stay here. Ba, let him go, and let him go wherever he wants. You've already decided everything for me, as far as I can see. Quickly, though. And what about the promise you made me? Sasuke's words seemed laced with sarcasm, but only Naruto could discern the brunette's true feelings. He was very angry. But Uzumaki couldn't see the reason for his anger. You just want more information, that's all. But you know what, Sasuke, go to hell. You'll probably never see me again soon, so be glad your dream has come true. The blonde saw the boy's face twist, and the Uchiha approached, swinging, but the Jinchuriki was expecting it, and simply looked straight into his opponent's eyes. Yes, they had been through a lot, but until now, Sasuke had been a friend to the Bijou Bearer, someone close and dear. That's perhaps why Naruto allowed all this. Let his friend feel better, even if it hurt. But no blow followed, as the Uchiha abruptly removed his bandaged hand and walked over to the other bed, settling himself more comfortably onto it. Naruto merely watched him, and after the brunette had settled, turned to Tsunade for an explanation. I'm sorry, but I can't do it any other way. You'll have to keep an eye on him, and... Naruto interrupted the woman, saying quietly, I can't. You know that yourself, Bachan, as a medic. The blonde shook his head, moving back to the headboard. Drawing his knees up, the Jinchuriki rested his head so he could see everyone. A fatigue washed over him, making him want nothing more than to sleep. I'd like to go on more missions while I still can. Don't stop me, I'll escape. I need a distraction, and besides, Akatsuki hasn't been defeated yet. I'd like to finish with them at least. And if Sasuke comes with me, I can't keep track of him, and he might contact Madara. My father told me about him when we fought Pain. Nagato sealed me in stone when the fox took control of me. That's when I met my father's chakra. The fourth told me that I must stop the threat looming over the shinobi world. The Toad Sage declared that I am the child of prophecy. Yeah, right. I can't be him, even if I wanted to. Naruto fell silent, deep in thought. But you shouldn't go on missions alone. You need someone on your team who's more experienced and older than you. At least someone who can help you if something happens. Tsunade sat down on a chair and now thoughtfully tried to help the blonde. Kakashi-sensei, you won't refuse my request, will you? The gaze was directed at the former NSA member. No, of course not. I'd be happy to keep you company. I'm glad you trust me. But then, Tsunade-sama, what should we do about Sasuke? Good, at least they remembered me. I was getting tired of this babble. I'm keeping an eye on Naruto, that was the deal. He'll keep an eye on me. And I don't care what state he's in or where he's going, I'll follow him. Naruto glared at his friend, but the other didn't even look in his direction, ignoring him. Very well, but don't get mad later that you got the most annoying guard. I won't always be able to watch your back, just as I won't be able to watch mine. I'm getting weaker, and soon I won't be able to walk or even possibly see or speak. Since you enjoy conversing with the future dead so much, then please, I'm at your service. Uzumaki Naruto is always ready to lend a helping hand. Naruto really lost his temper today, which happened all too rarely. Only if the situation was truly opportune. Well, perhaps that was the case now. Apparently, he'd already reached his limit today, because the anger disappeared as suddenly as it had appeared. He just felt empty, that's all. Sighing, Naruto ran a hand through his hair and laid his limb back down on the bed. He wanted to sleep, but even now that wasn't necessary. He still needed to tell his teacher and Sasuke what was happening to him. Bachan, it's your turn. We're not here to listen to me and Sasuke squabble. The blonde smiled slightly. It was a lively smile now, already resembling his old one. But Tsunade had caught something while watching the two's verbal bickering. Naruto looked alive next to this last scion of the Uchiha clan. This was both good and bad, but it was best for Uzumaki not to know about this observation, as he was already unhappy that his friend was staying by his side. The blonde wanted to distance himself from everyone. According to Naruto, the first attack happened back when you, Sasuke, attacked the 5th Kage. As we all know, your target was Danzo. So, after Uzumaki visited Gaara, who was pursuing the Uchiha, Naruto felt a severe pain in his chest and fell to the ground. A few days later, my unborn patient came to me for a checkup. I was truly surprised by his visit and fulfilled his request. And for a long time, I didn't believe the results of the examination. Naruto really is dying, and his illness is so advanced that there's little choice. His heart couldn't withstand the strain Naruto was under, and because of the stress. Unfortunately, he refused treatment, or more precisely, surgery. What about the fox? Doesn't it heal any injury? Sasuke sat with his elbows on his knees and stared straight at the Hokage. A cold, piercing gaze. He can't. I've already talked to him about it. I'm already thinking about resealing it in someone else. But my entire clan perished. I'm the last of the Uzumaki clan. Although, no, there's also Karen. Naruto stared at the wall, lost in his thoughts. Come to think of it, I don't trust her. And the Kyuubi won't be happy about being in a new body. He already hated me. After all, my mother and father sealed him in me. The fourth will truly remain my idol. Kakashi-sensei, you're lucky you studied under my father. Yes, Minato-sen was a wonderful teacher. He loved your mother very much, and you even more so, because you were his treasure. You're very similar to the fourth. Kakashi smiled slightly. Yes, we're similar, which is good news. Dad said I have my mom's personality. But it's not that important. I'll meet them soon. The blonde sighed, shifting his gaze from Kakashi. Bah, find me a mission for tomorrow. He didn't even need to look at the woman to know she was angry. Naruto. The Hokage hissed. You're not healed yet. You can't even move normally. I won't pay attention to that. Either you give me a task, or I'll run off to Gaara. I think he'll find something to keep me busy. His eyes flashed with determination. Okay. Tsunade sighed heavily. She knew she couldn't keep this boy in place, even if she put him in a cell. He'd escape, and then he'd tease everyone. Better to compromise than to contradict. Then I can give you one thing right away. Akatsuki has appeared in the Land of Wind. We need to check what they're after. I can only send you and Kakashi. You already know what they're capable of. You were able to defeat Pain after all. I understand, Bachan. I'll come see you tomorrow, but now you can leave me. I want to rest. Kakashi and Tsunade wordlessly complied with the Jinchuriki's request. Stretching his legs, Naruto tried to ignore his friend, who now seemed to be scanning him. He felt Sasuke's gaze on him, but continued to settle more comfortably on the bed. Turning away, he closed his eyes and tried to drift off to sleep. The next day, Uzumaki woke to his nurse urging him to take his medicine. The blonde didn't protest, as he usually did, but took what they gave him and got out of bed. His legs were still shaking, though the trembling had subsided. Consider it a small victory. Adjusting his pants and shirt, which had ridden up, Naruto put on his jacket and checked all his gear. The last thing he did was put on his shoes and tie on his forehead protector. He was ready to go see the Hokage. Turning to the next bed, the blonde didn't see Sasuke, which slightly relieved him. He didn't want to get close to him, and it was too late. Stepping to the window and opening it wide, the Jinchuriki jumped out, landing on another, lower roof. Confidently leaping over all the rooftops, Uzumaki soon reached the residence. Dropping to the ground, Naruto hurried into the building. As he climbed the steps, he sensed Sasuke's chakra. What he was doing there was unclear, though it could only be determined by entering the office. Opening the door and entering, Naruto looked at the people inside. Kakashi, Sasuke, and Tsunade were there, as well as an unknown shinobi Naruto hadn't seen before. After greeting everyone, he placed his hands behind his head as usual, awaiting his assignment. Naruto, here's the deal. Basically, there might be an ambush waiting for you there, the Hokage continued, gesturing at the unknown shinobi. He was sent to find Akatsuki's location, but he failed. I don't want to risk you, but it's dangerous. What's dangerous? That they might grab me and pull the fox out of me? Or that I might die like Gaara? Bah, you know yourself that I'll go even if you don't let me go. We talked about this yesterday. I should at least deal with him. Besides, I can use Sage Mode. You saw what I'm capable of in that mode. One of the pains was destroyed by a single blow from me. I've surpassed my teacher. I've completed the Rasen Shuriken, but you can't use it in your normal state. Your hand gets injured. The woman's voice was stern, but not in the usual mode. I just need to leave 2 clones here at the residence, that's all. I still have the scroll, and Kakashi will help me if needed. He'll distract the enemy. Naruto didn't give in, because he knew they'd do as he wanted. They just know that arguing with him is useless and pointless. Well then, go now. I hope everything will be alright with you. Senju's voice was tense, as she was worried about Uzumaki. Smiling, Naruto quickly turned and followed his teacher, who was their team leader. As expected, Sasuke followed, which didn't really surprise the blonde. He knew that if the Uchiha had something in mind, he would definitely do it. Sasuke was stubborn. Stepping outside, Uzumaki paused, arms raised and stretching. He couldn't wait to hit the road, to escape his problems and feel free. He'd run into his friends in the village, Irika. It was hard. His heart was starting to ache, but not in the same way, in a different way, because he couldn't tell them. And he also didn't want to lose the connection he'd worked so hard to establish. He'd had no friends as a child, but Shikamaru and Kiba had treated him normally, without disdain. Although Kiba had only later come to consider Naruto a friend. And now he had to do what his best friend had once done, cut off all ties, avoid meeting. It would be better if they didn't know anything, and that would be better for everyone. At least, Naruto was sure of it. As he began his journey, the Jinchuriki anticipated new adventures and battles. He wanted it now, because he needed to defeat the main enemies before the rest of the village could do something about Sasuke. Uzumaki listened to his instincts. Yes, he still wanted to deal with Sasuke himself, but it would be better this way. The clones had been left somewhere in the residence. There was no need to worry about them. Now it was time to set out calmly, but he needed to grab the scroll. Although Naruto didn't want to lug it around, he resealed it in another, smaller scroll that fit in his backpack. Satisfied with his progress, the blonde discussed with Kakashi the need to stop before reaching the Land of Wind to enter Sage Mode. The copy ninja was open to the idea, suggesting that perhaps Naruto could sense enemies in this mode. Naruto nodded his head in agreement and said he could summon toads to quickly transport them to the desired location. Sasuke remained silent the entire way, merely following beside him like a shadow. It was as if he were Naruto's bodyguard, not the other way around. Naruto tried to keep an eye on him, but didn't speak. There was no need. He didn't want to disturb the bond again. Let it remain as it was. They had always been strangers, although that was debatable. But the blonde didn't even want to think about it. Closer to the border, they stopped for a rest, preparing for the new journey. Naruto felt uneasy, unable to bear these roads any longer. His heart was reacting differently, clenching violently. But Naruto chose to ignore it, even though the pain was so intense that sometimes he felt as if he was suffocating. Pretending he was fine, he continued on. Oddly enough, whenever his heart was acting up, Sasuke would watch his friend, as if he knew what he was feeling, but he remained silent. Kakashi suggested stopping several times to rest, but Naruto only laughed it off. He didn't want to slow anyone down, so he remained silent. And as soon as they stopped, he took a deep breath and turned away, trying to assess his strength. His heart was still clenching and unclenching violently, his chest ached, and it was hard to breathe. Placing his hand on his chest, Naruto sighed a couple of times, removed his hand, and unslung his backpack. He rummaged through it and pulled out a scroll, performed hand seals, and pulled out another scroll. Laying it on the ground, he sat down next to it and tried to concentrate. It was difficult at first, as the pain was distracting. His face occasionally contorted, but Naruto quickly tried to pull himself together. After a few minutes, he finally managed to get his bearings, and soon he was in control. Opening his eyes, Naruto stood up, adjusting the cloak his toad teacher had given him. This cloak always appears when he's in Sage Mode. Picking up the scroll from the ground, Naruto tossed it over his shoulder, securing it. Turning to his friends, Naruto looked them over. Kakashi approached him with interest, examining them. Yes, he hadn't seen it yet, though he'd heard all about it. Sasuke simply watched, examining it, but without any interest. He was confident, believing he couldn't be defeated now. Naruto, this is complete mode, right? Kakashi asks, eager to know more. Yes. The perverted hermit said he hadn't mastered it completely, but the toads on the mountain said I did everything right. The blonde shook his head. It's a shame he's gone now. He was like a grandfather to me, the boy said with pain in his voice. You got revenge on Nagato for that, Kakashi said, trying to be supportive. It wasn't revenge. I just realized that revenge won't lead anywhere. I can't bring back someone dear to me, even if it were possible. I want him to be happy, wherever he is. Nagato told me that revenge only breeds suffering and many deaths. It's a vicious circle. It's a shame I can't keep my promise to him. Naruto smiled bitterly, shrugging. I promise a lot, But alas, I can't do everything. I know the exact date of my death. It's easy to calculate. Are you so sure about this, dope? Naruto shuddered in surprise. He hadn't expected Sasuke to speak. What? I don't understand what you're talking about. Frowning, the blonde truly didn't understand his friend. I'm talking about death. You can have the operation. There was an icy edge to his voice, as if it worried him. What's the point? I don't want to die in the operating room, because I'm not sure the operation will be successful. I might end up disabled, and I don't want to be messed with. I've never needed pity. Her voice wavered slightly. Let me kill you. The confident offer flew from Uchiha's lips. Okay, but after I deal with Akatsuki. If it makes things easier for you, then go ahead. Now we have to go. I've tracked them down. And my 5 minutes will be up soon. The blonde shrugged. You say it so casually. Sasuke's his surprise to Uzumaki. You become a weakling. Think whatever you want. I just want to make life easier for you, like everyone else. The guy turned away and ran. He knew they would follow him. The conversation wasn't over, but the Jinchuriki didn't think it necessary. He said what he thought. What others thought was of no interest to him now. Finding himself in the forest, Naruto turned sharply west, jumping onto the first branch. He knew the enemy already knew they'd been spotted and were coming to meet him. He folded his fingers and summoned 2 clones, preparing to attack. He knew they would meet soon. Extending his hand, he cast a Rasengan, which the clones mimicked. They were enormous Rasengans, which was very good. The clones moved forward, and soon explosions were heard. Well, he had to hurry. Kakashi also rushed forward. As soon as Naruto reached the clearing, he immediately headed towards the enemy, trying to catch him. But he missed, as his opponent was elusive. And these were also enemies Naruto was already familiar with. He'd fought them before, but now they were dead. Deidara and Sasori. Sensei is fighting the latter. Apparently, they simply couldn't pass each other by. Well, they're good opponents, you can't say anything. Reeling from a shell exploding near him and grazing him, Uzumaki snatched the scroll and threw it to the ground. He could only use the wind shuriken once, after which it would revert to normal. He needed to prepare to summon one of the clones from the residence. Having summoned the clones and dodged the bomb, Naruto stepped back and held his hand while 2 clones began spinning the cup in opposite directions. But he was nearly hit, as he was defenseless at that moment. Sasuke. He suddenly appeared next to Naruto and blocked Deidara's blow. Glancing at his friend in surprise, Uzumaki raised his hand, preparing for the blow. Take that! Throwing a Rasen Shuriken, the blonde staggered and sank to the ground. Well, even that was hard for him to do. He's certain he won't be able to enter the mode again, even if he summons a clone. Something dances in his eyes, but Uzumaki doesn't care. He needs to get up, calm down, but the pain has returned, only with even greater intensity. Getting on all fours, Naruto tries to exhale the air trapped in his lungs, but nothing works. Shaking his head, the blonde finally exhales, realizing he's never been this bad. Better to die quickly and painlessly, even if it's Sasuke who does it. Cautiously, feeling the pain with every fiber of his being, Naruto looks up and notices that Sasuke is now fighting Deidara, and Sasori is almost defeated. But then the one the Jinchuriki least wanted to see, Orochimaru's former assistant, Kabuto, appears and recalls the corpses to some coffins, and they disappear. He says something, but Naruto doesn't hear. He can only watch, observe. He sees Sasuke and Kakashi approaching him, as if protecting him. Apparently, the traitor wanted to take Naruto, but they decided to refuse. The enemy chuckled and said something to Sasuke, but Naruto couldn't make it out. He lowered his head and struggled to sit on the ground. Resting his head on his knees, he closed his eyes and tried to calm himself. After a few minutes, he began to discern noises and voices. Raising his head, Uzumaki looked at his friends, who were looking at him. Naruto, can you hear me? Kakashi's voice was alarmed. Yes, I hear it now. What happened? The owner's voice was completely out of control. Everything's fine. They left, but they promised to catch you. You and Killer Bee stayed, and the rest of the tailed beasts have already been captured. I'm not surprised, they're strong. Perhaps we should rest. Is there a hotel nearby? He closed his eyes for a moment, then immediately opened them again, trying to look at Sasuke, who was watching the blonde sullenly. Yes, there's a village nearby. Apparently, there are some springs there, too. Kakashi stood up, offering Naruto his hand. They grabbed it and carefully lifted the boy up. I can carry you if you're feeling unwell. It's okay, Kakashi-sensei. I can do it myself. I told you I don't want to be coddled. His legs still didn't want to move. They were shaking. Sighing, Uzumaki took the first hesitant step, but his legs gave way. Weakling. That's what the blonde thought when Sasuke caught him just as he was about to fall. Dobe, I won't ask your permission now, so you'll do as I say. His eyes were stern, though emotionless. I won't listen to you, Naruto muttered, trying to break free from the Uchiha's grasp. I'll walk or crawl. It doesn't matter. Standing up and breaking free from his grasp, Naruto stubbornly strode toward the village. Kakashi had already moved ahead, as if trusting Sasuke, which surprised Naruto. The teacher had never acted like this before. Having caught up with the teacher, the blonde fell into step with him, though his gait was unsteady. Sasuke walked behind, providing backup. Once at the hotel, Kakashi took rooms, of which there were only 2. Everyone hurried to their rooms. What surprised Uzumaki most was when Sasuke came to his room and announced he was staying the night with him. The excuse was that Naruto was supposed to be keeping an eye on him. The blonde found it funny, because he knew that wasn't true. He didn't know Sasuke's reasons for doing this, but he didn't really care. Let him do whatever he wanted. Let him play whatever he wanted. It's just that right now Naruto was willing to play along while he had the time. Just don't let him get too close to him. It would be excruciatingly painful, and then it would be hard to leave him alone. After visiting the springs and taking a good bath, Naruto hurried to his room to take his medicine and lie down on the futon. Making himself comfortable, the blonde closed his eyes, lost in thought. The sound of the door opening made him open his eyes and look at the person entering. It was Sasuke, who, apparently having accomplished everything he wanted, hurried back to his assigned room. Sitting down on his futon, he began drying his hair, watching his former friend. Naruto closed his eyes again, seemingly lost in thought. Several minutes passed before the Uchiha spoke. Are you going to ignore me? Sasuke spoke without arrogance for the first time. His voice was quiet, melodic. No, but I'm not looking for ways to communicate with you either. I don't want to get close to anyone. The guy still didn't open his eyes. Does communication mean getting closer to you? Ridiculous. You know we have nothing in common. All ties are broken. The voice seemed unfamiliar. The brunette hadn't spoken like that in a long time. And you still believe that? Well, I won't try to convince you otherwise. Certainly not now, and I won't run around looking for you either. And there's no point. You wanted freedom, so why are you here now? What's stopping you from doing what you want? The blonde man looked away and turned his head, glancing sideways at his friend. You promised me we'd die together, and instead you stopped stopping me and even decide to die. Dobe, finish the job. The brunette hisses, turning to Uzumaki. I'm just giving you freedom, that's all. You so wanted no one to bother you, and as soon as I do that, you appear in my life. Why? The Jinchuriki really wants to know. I don't know. It was truly unexpected, but it was the truth. Uchiha realized that he truly didn't know the answer to this question. Don't you hate me? I never hated you. You were always my friend, the one I treasured most. Now I really want to break our bond. Naruto looked into his friend's eyes. Sasuke stared back, as if searching for a catch, a lie. But, convinced that Naruto was telling the truth, he stood up abruptly and approached the blonde. Kneeling before Naruto's legs, which the blonde had managed to tuck under, he leaned over, coming face to face with his former friend. Sasuke licked his lips, as if reaching a conclusion. Naruto glanced nervously at his friend, trying to push him away or even escape, but his attempt was immediately stopped. Grabbing his shoulders, the Uchiha pulled the Jinchuriki back down and continued to hold him, while the blonde tried to break free. Looking at his friend in surprise, Naruto saw a strange glint in the brunette's eyes that made his skin crawl. The Uzumaki had never seen Sasuke like this before. He couldn't even describe what his friend was about to do. He could only hope Sasuke wouldn't try to strangle him. But suddenly, the brunette leaned in, kissing him on the lips. Naruto's eyes widened slightly, and he opened his mouth in surprise, which the Uchiha took advantage of. The brunette not only didn't stop kissing, but deepened the kiss, exploring the roof of his mouth, teeth, and touching Naruto's tongue with his own. It was as if he wanted to explore what he had been allowed, though Naruto didn't do so. Taking a sharp breath, Uzumaki felt himself tremble. This frightened him greatly, so he tried to pull himself together and push his friend away. It didn't work right away, as his arms refused to obey him, and the weakness in his body only grew. Pushing Sasuke away, Naruto stood up and crawled away from the brunette. Only near the wall, a good distance from the Uchiha, did the blonde glance at his friend, wiping his lips with his hand. He saw Sasuke smirking, as if pleased with what he had done. Naruto was deeply indignant and hurt by this. Sasuke was playing with him. "What are you doing, Dadabeo?" the blonde shouted, still not taking his eyes off the Uchiha. "I told you I want you to hate me." Uchiha grinned and moved towards his friend. Naruto glanced at Sasuke, stunned, trying to comprehend the words. But he couldn't wrap his head around the fact that the brunette had decided to finish him off this way. He couldn't wrap his head around that kiss, and he wanted to slam his head against something heavy, even a wall. Or better yet, slam the Uchiha's head against the same wall the blonde was currently leaning against a couple of times. Uzumaki glanced nervously at his friend, trying to calm himself, but all he could do was clench his hands into fists and glare menacingly. The Jinchuriki frowned, turning away from Uchiha. He needed to get up and leave the room for Kakashi. It was safe there. But he couldn't leave Sasuke behind. Uzumaki had been posted as a guard. He was sickened by the fact that he couldn't leave, but staying felt somehow dangerous. "No matter what you do, and I won't do it, how can you not understand this, Sasuke? I want, when I die, to think that you are my friend and will remain so forever." A flash of sadness and pain flickered in his blue eyes, which didn't escape the brunette. Sasuke frowned sharply and moved closer to Naruto. He didn't touch him, but simply sat opposite him, looking into his eyes. For the first time, he saw the blonde show his true emotions. Usually, everything was hidden behind a dull smile, but it was so bright and feigned that many believed it. Everyone, that is, except Sasuke and Team 7. They saw the heartache reflected briefly in his gaze, only to disappear immediately. They wanted to hug him, to console him, but Uzumaki seemed to be demonstrating that this wasn't necessary. He was used to dealing with his difficulties by clenching his fists tightly and smiling. No one saw him cry, because the sun never cries, it only warms and gives hope. But now everything was different, and Sasuke saw it. Naruto simply no longer saw the point in hiding everything that had been pent up inside him for a long time. Now it all came out, breaking the boy outwardly. The Uchiha saw Naruto trembling, but the boy stubbornly tried to maintain his composure. He saw the pain enveloping the boy, and the blonde, without realizing it, clutched his shirt tightly to his chest, where his heart was. He breathed deeply, trying not to choke. But the Jinchuriki seemed oblivious, merely looking straight at Sasuke with such a stubborn expression that the brunette couldn't move to help. Sasuke saw how bad Naruto was, but he could only watch calmly emotionless, as if he had truly lost all emotion. Not a muscle twitched at Uzumaki's words, but such a fire blazed inside that he wanted to rip his heart out to stop feeling it. He knew he could help Naruto, but he did nothing. Naruto was a rival who should die at his hands. He had to kill him himself, and until then, Uzumaki had to live. Reaching out for the blonde, Uchiha didn't expect Naruto to recoil from him and then, unnaturally, begin to fall to the side. He saw Uzumaki gasp and sigh convulsively, as if the pain had truly overcome him, and he was about to lose consciousness or worse. Sasuke was instantly at his side, unsure how he managed it, and caught his friend. "Naruto?" It came out a little louder. His voice was frightened, but Sasuke couldn't help it. For the second time, Uzumaki had fallen before him, as if it were the end. "Don't you dare close your eyes," he said, almost in a whisper. "I don't want you to die. I don't want you to leave me like Itachi, like my parents did. You alone remain faithful to me." Gently touching Naruto's face, the brunette opened his soul to his not-so-former friend. "I'm glad you told the truth at least now." Naruto's voice was very quiet, no longer as clear as before. "I will believe in you even afterward, because you are the most precious person to me." His eyes closed, and the hand that had been touching the Uchiha's shoulder fell, touching the floor. Dark eyes widened, and the brunette holding the blonde swayed, falling headfirst onto the Jinchuriki's body. He wrapped his arms around his friend, pulling him closer, listening to his heartbeat. Only when he heard the quiet thumping of his heart did he exhale, trying to pull himself together. Sasuke frantically recalled Naruto mentioning to Kakashi that he had some pills in his backpack, prescribed by Tsunade, that could dull the pain and help for a while. Carefully lifting the blonde's body, the Uchiha stood up and moved toward the backpack. He didn't want to leave Uzumaki on the floor, so he dragged him to the cot, carefully covering him with a thin blanket. Then, finding the backpack, he rummaged through it, pulling out a bottle of pills. Confused, he glanced first at the bottle and then at Uzumaki, then picked up a bottle of water and took a sip. Sasuke leaned toward Naruto, unscrewing the cap from the bottle and pulling out a pill. He popped it into his mouth, but he didn't know how. So, trusting his instincts, he pressed down on his chin, forcing his mouth open, leaned in, and began pouring the liquid in along with the pill. Once he was done, he pulled back slightly, watching the boy's reaction. He saw how pale his friend's face was, how his chest rarely rose to inhale and exhale, taking in a small amount of oxygen. It made him sick, because he had never seen Naruto so weak. Even when the village hated the charming little blonde, he never cried. He only smiled radiantly. Sasuke knew this. His heart ached every time he saw what the village did to this child. Even then, he was like family. And only now did Sasuke begin to understand the meaning of these feelings that always haunted him whenever he saw Naruto. Yes, at first, he considered him a bore, incapable of anything, but the closer he got to know him, the more he understood. He saw how Uzumaki was trying to gain recognition, and how now he seemed indifferent to what he had achieved. Now the village loved him and was ready to protect him, but the blonde himself was pushing away help, wanting to be alone. To die alone, just like he had as a child. He didn't understand that now he would never be alone, because all his friends believed in him, striving to live up to him, to be equal to this goal-oriented boy. But Uzumaki no longer cared. He was disappointed in himself, having come up with a bunch of excuses to remain alone. The Uchiha was familiar with this, but not so much that he considered them similar. The brunette believed that he could not become stronger, because the more connections he had, the weaker he became. Naruto simply wanted to leave alone, without anyone worrying or hurting him. He didn't want to burden anyone. He believed that if he continued as he was now, he would become useless, so he cut off the ties that connected him to his friends beforehand. Sasuke reached his hand into the boy's hair and began to comb through it. He wanted to take away the pain Naruto held within, but he couldn't. The Uchiha could only touch the boy, his hair, his cheeks, his lips. He wanted to touch his lips again, because the taste of their kiss still lingered on the brunette's. He desperately wanted to hug him and never let go, but Sasuke only leaned in, giving him a weightless kiss. Nothing would ever be the same again, because the feelings had returned with such force that Sasuke knew he wouldn't be able to remain calm if anything happened to Naruto. He simply couldn't stand still, and he was ready to do anything to protect this blonde misunderstanding, who now didn't want to live. Sasuke was going to make Naruto live, even if it meant making him hate him, which he didn't really want. But he didn't want Naruto to be alone and die. Naruto woke early in the morning, just as the sun was rising in the sky, already slightly warming everything with its warm rays. The blonde opened his eyes, immediately staring at the ceiling. Uzumaki had to work hard to remember what had happened yesterday. And when the realization and events of the previous day came to mind, the Jinchuriki only sighed, realizing there was no point in worrying about it. Sasuke wouldn't do anything to him, because before Naruto closed his eyes, he saw his friend's puzzled face. Sasuke always seemed unperturbed, but it was still possible to draw out his true thoughts, which revealed the real him. It was just that Uchiha thought his emotions were also a weakness. He was wrong, but it was impossible to convince him otherwise. Stubborn. Turning his head slightly, the blonde glanced in surprise at Sasuke, who was sleeping next to him, his head resting on Naruto's shoulder. He wasn't hugging him in his sleep, only resting his head on his shoulder. It was sweet on one hand, but on the other, it evoked unwanted emotions in Naruto that hadn't been there before. He didn't even want to think about them. No, the blonde couldn't imagine that he liked his friend, or that he enjoyed this closeness right now. No, he didn't even want to think about it. Carefully pulling his shoulder out of the way and propping himself up with a pillow, Naruto stood and walked toward the exit. He needed some fresh air. He didn't know what time it was, but he assumed it was still very early. Uzumaki knew that Kakashi-sensei was probably asleep or reading the perverted hermit's book. Yes, perhaps there would be no more books from his teacher. Naruto couldn't help but droop, remembering the times he traveled with the pervert. The old man hadn't taught him much, but he'd become a family member, a close friend. Jiraiya believed his student would be the child of the prophecy. But something didn't add up. Minato, the father, was dead, and he, Naruto, would soon join his parents. There was still Konan, but the girl was unlikely to become the salvation of the shinobi world. No one would believe a former Akatsuki member. After all, the prophecy was false. Finding himself in the fresh air, Naruto sat down on the porch, shivering from the wind. It hadn't yet warmed up completely. The sun was just rising. Naruto glanced sideways at the dawn, recalling how many times he'd seen it as a child, perched on his father's head. He'd always felt comfortable there, as if he felt a kinship with the four-stone face. The Jinchuriki sighed, turning his gaze to the old tree that grew to the right of the house. Its branches drooped toward the ground, but the trunk itself seemed to strive upward. It seemed to the blonde that they were similar. After all, he'd lived like this his whole life. Many things weighed on him, yet he forged ahead, trying to help and save everyone. Perhaps he was wrong. Naruto quickly shook his head, pushing those thoughts away. He'd always done the right thing. And even now, he was doing the right thing, trying to distance himself from everyone. It was better for everyone that way. Uzumaki didn't immediately notice the Uchiha sitting down next to him, his gaze shifting to the same tree. The blonde glanced at his friend, but said nothing. They sat in silence for a couple of minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Uzumaki was consumed by various, sometimes delirious, thoughts. What the Uchiha was thinking, the boy didn't know, and didn't particularly want to know. For now, the silence between them suited him. It was calming and cozy. The Jinchuriki raised his head, examining the sky. The sun had already begun to warm. It was no longer cold, but warm. Even the wind had become pleasant, warming, rather than piercing. The blonde wanted to live out his remaining days like this, finally feeling free. But there were still many things to do, many things to undertake. He wanted to live, but that was impossible. Although Naruto somehow knew there was a way out of his illness. He knew it, but he didn't tell anyone. No one needed to know about it. No, this wasn't the surgery Tsunade had suggested. It was a dangerous treatment with a low chance of recovery. He was more likely to lose the last few days, weeks he had left. He didn't want to lose them either. The blonde sighed, realizing he'd never been afraid before, moving forward without thinking about the consequences. But damn it, he wanted to do this. He just wanted to live and finish everything he'd promised, everything he'd been entrusted with. His father had appeared to him in a dream that night and told him about this method. Naruto was surprised, as his father couldn't have known about it, and Minato couldn't possibly have offered his son such a dangerous solution. But it was clear his father wanted his son to live the life he dreamed of. He saw Naruto's desire to live and couldn't help but help, even though he knew it was too dangerous. Naruto bit his lip, remembering his dream. Yes, perhaps his father's advice would have helped, but that would require sacrifice. Naruto didn't want to sacrifice what he had. He couldn't do that. It would have meant betraying him. Dope, if you think so hard, your head will explode. Naruto, you shouldn't think too much. Your ideas are too crazy. Sasuke was as cold as ever, though his gaze spoke volumes. Naruto turned to his friend, still pondering the treatment. His eyes met the Uchihas, but the brunette felt like the Jinchuriki didn't see him. Still, the blonde answered, I just need to die so I don't get in your way. Naruto's gaze returned to the tree, examining it. Say that again, and I'll kill you, Sasuke hissed, clenching his teeth and grabbing his friend's shoulders. Kill! Then, as if distracted, he continued on about something else. Father's proposed method is not bad, but it's dangerous. I won't survive, although it's worth a try. I wonder where my stubbornness went. The blonde tilted his head, continuing to stare at the tree. Naruto, what are you even talking about? The missing nin growled, trying to rouse Uzumaki. I'm also curious about what Minato-san could have told you, Naruto. Kakashi appeared on the porch. He jumped down, landing on the ground, and approached the former members of Team 7. He was already dressed, though his hair was disheveled, suggesting he'd only just gotten dressed. His gaze was intrigued. Crouching down next to his student, the copy ninja looked into the blonde's eyes, trying to find an answer there. The Uchiha snorted, releasing his friend's shoulders. But he didn't leave, remaining waiting for an answer. For some reason, Naruto wasn't afraid to speak his thoughts to Kakashi, but he wasn't afraid to speak to his former friend, preferring to speak in fragments or in incomprehensible words that only caused confusion. Naruto was silent for a moment, as if collecting his thoughts and arranging them. Then he perked up slightly, and his gaze brightened. He smiled only slightly, turning his gaze to his teacher. It was a lively smile, and the boy's demeanor spoke only of being alive, or rather, coming to life. Kakashi frowned, trying to figure out what had caused it. Sasuke, meanwhile, became wary, studying Naruto closely, but Naruto ignored him, merely appearing pleased. How can I explain this? Naruto frowned, losing his smile. His expression took on a more thoughtful look, as if he was choosing his words. Father told me I needed to go to the old temple, but it seems to be in Akatsuki territory. I think that's what he said. The boy's lips pursed slightly, as if he didn't like this information. They can help me there, but it's dangerous, because even there, at the temple, there's no guarantee they'll help me. More precisely, there's no guarantee, even a 30% chance, that I'll survive. But how could Minato-san tell you that? His chakra disappeared completely back when you fought Pain. Kakashi was puzzled. He knew his teacher couldn't possibly have advised something half-baked. Minato was a genius who calculated his moves ahead, or at least he tried to. In my dream, he warned me, told me all the consequences. Naruto clutched his hair with a hand he'd managed to lift. Damn! I'm so glad I saw my father again. So there's a chance you'll be healthy? The teacher thoughtfully decided to ask again. Perhaps, but it's even more dangerous than surgery. So I don't know what to do. Uzumaki shrugged, glancing at Sasuke, who, for some reason, hadn't joined the conversation. The Uchiha was thoughtful, as if he, too, was pondering something. Only when he felt the blonde's gaze on him did he look up and return it, trying to convey his thoughts and feelings. Naruto shuddered, realizing what Sasuke was trying to tell him. Yes, this had never happened before, and it wasn't so much unpleasant as unexpected. Naruto! But Uchiha didn't have time to finish, because Naruto interrupted him. You wanted me to die by your hand, Sasuke, so you will have your chance. I will fight you. I am ready to die with you, as I promised. Uzumaki stood up, stretching. Naruto! It sounded too menacing, too loud. Sasuke jumped up after him, glaring at the blonde. Uzumaki just shrugged. You wanted this yourself, and I'm giving you this chance. After all, weren't you the one who recently said you wanted to kill me? So, I want to fulfill my promise to you. Sasuke frowned, as if not understanding what his friend had said. Would you prefer salvation to death? Sasuke asked coldly, realizing he had flared up and shown his emotions again. Yes, that's what I said. Naruto stepped away, feeling the pain return. He hadn't taken the pills yet, which was necessary. Taking a few deep breaths, Naruto tried to calm his heart, but it preferred to ache. Giving up on it, Uzumaki turned his gaze to his friends, who were watching his actions, still thinking about something. Naruto saw their worries, sensed their emotions. It seemed so possible. He'd been able to do this before, but hadn't wanted to learn. There simply hadn't been a need. But after visiting the toads, he'd learned not only to meditate, fight, and use his mind for its intended purpose, but also to tune into the emotions of others, to sense their feelings. It was useful. Although now, he couldn't believe the truth of Uchiha's feelings. It seemed he was now against the fight, wanting to save the blonde. The Jinchuriki didn't like this. Sasuke wasn't the same. It was as if something had happened in the night, as if something had changed his friend. Shaking his head, dispelling these strange thoughts, Uzumaki went to a tree and sat down under it. He sat cross-legged, intending to meditate like this for a while. He had to learn to enter hermit mode even in pain. It was difficult, as the pain was distracting, but after a while, the blonde managed to pull himself together and refocus. Opening his eyes, Naruto looked around, noticing the changes happening nearby and even for several kilometers. He saw Sasuke and Kakashi already sitting on the porch, talking quietly, as if nothing had happened. Then he sensed someone else's chakra. Someone else's. They were being watched, which wasn't surprising. He skillfully hid his chakra. Even Sasuke and Kakashi couldn't sense it, but for Naruto, it was easier now. He sensed this world, sensed chakra, knew its color. It even had its own color and scent. Sasuke, by the way, wasn't permeated with a foul odor, and his chakra wasn't dangerous or threatening. Rather, it was cold. Blue. Kakashi's was silver, like his hair. Not exactly dangerous, but there was a metallic note of uninhibitedness, menace. Naruto stood, dusting his pants, and hurried to find the dangerous chakra, heading for its source. Kakashi, sensing his student's movement, stood up, attempting to follow him. But the blonde raised his hand, stopping him. Naruto, too, stopped, bit his finger, performing hand seals and summoning a toad. He needed to seize the moment of surprise. The small toad appeared and looked at Uzumaki with awe. Naruto-san, it's nice to see you again. Naruto smiled, sitting down to pick up the toad, placing it on his shoulder. Hello, Karaguchi. I have a favor to ask of you. You can feel it now, right? Naruto turned toward the source. Yes, perhaps. It's an unpleasant sensation, though. The toad tilted her head, looking in the same direction as Naruto. I understand, Naruto. And then she disappeared, dissolving in a puff of smoke. What's up, Naruto? Kakashi stepped closer, trying to see what his student had seen. But he saw and felt nothing. Sasuke approached too, placing his hand on his sword, ready for a fight, though he, too, sensed no danger. He's dangerous, armed, and hides his presence well, but I can catch him. Naruto licked his lips, feeling his little toad already approaching its target. Well, now it's time. Having already performed other seals, the cloak he had received as a gift from the toads appeared. It was a memento of his teacher. Having retied his village forehead protector, Naruto crouched slightly, giving himself more support. Then he ran, accelerating and sprinting up to the roof of the house, pushing off with all his strength. He created several clones of himself in the air, casting Raisengans, but was left without one himself. Sensing a threat, the chakra began to move, but for some reason not backwards, but forward towards him. Naruto grinned, performing another seal and summoning the toad again, this time stronger and larger. The toad, knowing what to do, grabbed Uzumaki and threw him towards his opponent. Flying past, Naruto found himself in a clearing, and all his clones surrounded him, preventing the escape of the one who was now also in the clearing. The man grinned but kept his hood up, preferring to remain anonymous. Naruto looked at the one whose chakra was hostile, black. Everything screamed danger, though the enemy himself didn't seem strong. Then the man raised his head, and Naruto saw the mask. Madara. They'd met before, but Naruto hadn't told anyone. There was no need. That was bad. But what's worse is that Kakashi and Sasuke were already right there. They shouldn't have been allowed here. They shouldn't have overheard the conversation or interfered at all. So we meet again, host of the Nine-Tailed Fox, Uzumaki Naruto. Nice to meet you. It's good that I met you. There was feigned joy in his voice, but the blonde knew it was a lie. And you're in a hostile mood, I see. Perhaps we could talk. I have a proposition for you. Uzumaki shuddered slightly, receiving information from his clone. Sasuke stabbed one of them, appearing in the clearing. Another couple of meters, and he and Kakashi would hear everything. I offer you my body so that we can remove the Kyuubi from you, and I will release Sasuke. He will be free. The fox in Naruto's mind growled, not trusting a single word from the traitor who had taken advantage of his power. Naruto looked away, remembering not to look the Uchiha in the eye, as they might use their power to forcefully pull the fox out. He felt solidarity with the Nine-Tails now, and mentally reassured it that he wouldn't let Madara do that. The Kyuubi was important to him, and he wasn't about to part with it voluntarily. The fox merely chuckled at this, but said its name. Naruto frowned for a second, trying to figure out what it meant, to which the fox laughed, declaring it was his name. I know you're sick, Naruto, the Uchiha continued, ignoring the new spectators. He was only interested in the blonde, who was calm and collected, yet thoughtful. Obito thought he'd managed to capture the boy's interest. I can let you die painlessly. Oh, really? Or maybe you were asking me if I wanted to die by your hand and have the fox pulled out of me. The Jinchuriki spat angrily, looking at Madara. You know nothing about me or Kurama to demand such a thing from me. Who's Kurama? And don't go off topic. The masked man was puzzled. Naruto remembered his 5 minutes were running out, but he'd managed to send out 2 clones to gather his natural chakra, and the scroll lay hidden beneath his feet. Karaguchi had done her best. So, breaking his spell, Naruto sat down on the ground, ready to respond at any moment. I won't die by your hand, but by Sasuke's. Either way, you won't get my fox. It's my demon, who will die with me and be reborn, stronger and more powerful. Kurama is strong, and he will take revenge on you, who betrayed him. Naruto shrugged, pulling a kunai from his bag. Sasuke can't kill you, and you know it. The shinobi grinned, folding his arms across his chest. You're wrong too. I'm the obstacle to his revenge on Konoha. Naruto smiled slightly. His revenge is more important than his friends. Yes, he wouldn't mind giving me death. Boy, you're as stupid as your father. Madara boomed, moving a little closer. Well, it's genes. Although your father beat you, that means I can too. The kunai rose, pointing at the enemy. Confident boy. The man spat angrily, heading towards Uzumaki, pulling out a kunai. The Jinchuriki bit his finger, pressing it to the ground and shouting, "Reverse summon." A pop was heard nearby, and the clone vanished, transferring all his natural chakra. Only at the last moment did Uzumaki manage to dodge the kunai, placing his own kunai as a shield. Madara, jumping away from it, merely grunted, preparing to attack again. Naruto stood, also preparing to move. But the pain struck hard, and the blonde staggered, his face twisting slightly. Gritting his teeth, he tried to control himself, but the pain prevented him from even moving. Uzumaki sighed in defeat, at least regaining his composure. Kakashi and Sasuke were already standing nearby, their kunai drawn. I'll do it myself. Naruto croaks through his teeth. I didn't ask your permission, dope. Sasuke recalled, frowning, his eyes fixed on the masked man. Oh, Sasuke, what a surprise. You'll help me, right? The man said sweetly. I don't need you or your organization. All I need is the host of the Nine Tails and the village's revenge. You're useless, Sasuke says, his lips curling in a harsh reply. Oh, so you betrayed me. Another traitor. Madara echoes angrily, then looks at Naruto. You're remaking everyone to suit your own needs, boy. Naruto just shrugs. Fine. I'll retreat now, but then I'll come back and then it will definitely be the end. Do you hear me, Naruto? Naruto smiled. I'm long past the end. Another couple of weeks, and I'll never see your face again. The blonde replied indifferently. So, I have a couple of weeks. That's very little time, the man said thoughtfully, and then disappeared. Naruto collapsed, landing on the ground. He sighed and ran his hand through his hair, lifting his forehead protector. The pain gripped his heart tighter and spread throughout his body, sending him into hellish agony. What do you mean, a couple of weeks? Sasuke asked rudely, looking at the blonde. I told you I know my death date. Kurama and I calculated it when we tried to talk. Naruto frowned. He didn't want to talk about it. And he didn't need to know about it, the Uchiha. It simply didn't matter. All Naruto was trying to do now was get rid of the pain. Kakashi sat down next to him, handing him the pills and a bottle of water. Smiling at his teacher, Naruto took the bottle and unscrewed the cap, then picked up the bottle, taking out a couple of pills, and popped them into his mouth, washing them down with water. How much? Sasuke didn't let up. How much? The Jinchuriki tilted his head back, looking into his friend's eyes. How many weeks? There's a steely edge to his voice. It's enough for our battle. The blonde man answers calmly. No, Uzumaki, that's not enough. Sasuke growls, grabbing his friend by the shirt and lifting him up, forcing him to stand. Naruto winces but says nothing, even though he can't feel his legs for some reason. I don't want to fight you while you're weak. I'm not weak, Naruto says angrily, throwing off the Uchiha's hands, but immediately loses his balance as his legs refuse to support him. Damn it, he says, getting even angrier. Yeah, move it. Naruto hisses, looking at his feet. Naruto? Kakashi manages to grab his hand, offering his shoulder so his student can lean on it. Naruto is practically hanging on his teacher, frowning even more and looking angrily at his feet. You can't fight me in this condition, and I don't want an easy victory. Sasuke continues, watching his friend's countless attempts to stand. Your legs can't even support you. Naruto looks up, sending shivers down Sasuke's spine. His gaze is so hopeless that Sasuke is at a loss, looking at his friend and falling silent. I can't feel my legs. Naruto breathes out. equals 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 the decision to save equals 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 equals. Commentary on the rescue decision. The author sincerely apologizes, but I was so buried in studying that I couldn't finish the chapter, which I only did today, smiley face. I hope you like this part. Although in my opinion it turned out to be nothing special, sad face. I'm thinking about maybe putting the fanfic on hold. It hasn't been written yet because the author was in a hurry. Naruto couldn't understand how this could have happened. His legs wouldn't let him down. Not now, it was supposed to happen in about a week. And how was he supposed to finish his work now? He didn't know, and he was becoming increasingly despondent and apathetic. He'd already stopped holding on to Kakashi and dropped his arms, feeling too helpless. In front of everyone he cared about. It was disgusting, because the blonde didn't want this. He didn't want anyone to see him become like this. He'd imagined a different ending, where he'd spend the last week of his life hiding from everyone in his secret place, living out his days peacefully and without his loved ones. But everything collapsed like a house of cards. Falling to the ground, Uzumaki sighed and tried to collect his emotions to hide them. But nothing worked, and the boy was increasingly overcome with anxiety and trembling. Naruto gasped, realizing he couldn't cope. He simply retreated into himself, falling deeper into his consciousness, closer to the fox who could protect him. Kurama sensed the boy's fear, so it pulled him closer, trying to save him, to protect him. The fox wanted to help its host, but Uzumaki was prevented, shaken, and forced to return to his body. Kyuubi growled, because only one person could do this. The wielder of the Sharingan. The Uchiha. Naruto, don't you dare. You can't give up. Sasuke shook him off, looking worriedly at his friend. He felt through the bond every emotion the Uzumaki was currently experiencing. You're the one who never gave up. Breathe, or I'll make you breathe and live. Sasuke, you don't understand. I'm already a corpse with a couple of days left to live. Nothing can be changed, the blonde said hoarsely, looking up at the brunette. He simply couldn't stand it anymore. He'd spoken the truth, which only made everyone's pain worse. I said that I won't let you die, Sasuke hissed, grabbing Naruto by the shoulders and then pulling him close, hugging him. He continued a little quieter. You're all I have left. You have to live. I should have been killed by you. I don't want you to die. You're selfish, Sasuke. Nothing can be your way. I'm going to die anyway. It's my destiny, the boy said quietly, burying his face in his friend's shoulder. He believed his words, because the illness would never let him go. Sasuke froze, feeling Naruto's breath and the pressure on his head, but it was just a pleasant discomfort he didn't want to lose. Sasuke couldn't believe Naruto's words, so he frantically thought about what he could do. He already had a rough idea of what he would do. He just needed to put it into action. But knowing his friend, he would resist, choosing death over salvation. Anything for others, but not for himself. And he needed to take care of himself at least once. Taking a deep breath, Sasuke lowered his arms, scooping up his friend to lift him. Naruto, though he'd grown taller since they'd last seen each other, still weighed next to nothing. It was a little heavy, but manageable. Standing, the brunette walked to a tree, settling his friend next to it so Naruto could rest his back against something. Naruto grumbled at this, declaring that he wanted to get back down to earth and have that damn Uchiha put him down. Sasuke wasn't listening, already planning his entire escape from the Akatsuki border. He was planning to visit the temple Minato-sen had told his son about. The missing Nin believed it existed, having heard about it briefly from Orochimaru, who loved to chat about such places. He just needed to get Naruto to agree to go voluntarily, though Sasuke could easily just carry him there. He knew the Uzumaki might not forgive him, but he wanted the best. For the first time, he wanted to help not himself, but someone close to him, someone he loved. He loved them, and he had no intention of abandoning them, because they truly were parts of a single whole, as the snake Sannin had put it. All that remained was to enlist Kakashi's support. Turning to face his teacher, Sasuke immediately recognized from his gaze that the copy ninja agreed with him completely. The Uchiha smiled slightly, shaking his head, and then looking back at Uzumaki, who was huffing and puffing, looking increasingly like a cat. The outlaw couldn't help but be moved by the sight, though he didn't show it outwardly. Reaching into his friend's hair, Sasuke touched his forehead first, checking his temperature. The brunette knew the fox kept his body free of disease, but that could all change now. But no, his forehead was cold, which pleased the boy. Pulling out a light travel blanket with his other hand, he covered his friend, trying to warm him up, or rather, he wanted the blonde to sleep while he and Kakashi discussed the situation. "Dope, get some sleep." He stroked her head, slightly tousling her hair. "I don't want to, Dadabayo. You weren't even listening to me just now, team." Naruto continued grumbling, ignoring the Uchiha's hand. But he obeyed and closed his eyes anyway. He knew he needed to calm down. And sleep was a better alternative in this situation. Sasuke watched the boy for a few more minutes, then, making sure he was asleep, stood up and walked over to Kakashi, sitting down next to his former teacher. They were silent for a few minutes, collecting their thoughts and deciding what to do next. It was a difficult decision, but after all, the life of the most vocal shinobi, cherished and loved by many, was at stake. "Sasuke, do you really want to help Naruto?" The copy ninja watched his student closely, trying to discern whether he was telling the truth or lying. "I don't want him to die, Kakashi. Only recently did I realize what he means to me. Last night made me realize what I've been trying to hide deep inside." For the first time, Sasuke spoke at length, and the words flowed naturally, not under duress. "I have to save him now. After all, it was he who didn't abandon me when everyone else turned their backs. I have to do it, and no one else, because then it will change his mind. He'll understand that death is not an option. I know what that is." Sasuke frowned, remembering how he wanted to follow his brother after his death, because he didn't understand what was keeping him here now. But then he remembered Naruto, Team 7, and then he learned the truth about Itachi and the village from Madara, and he was consumed with revenge. And then he realized that revenge wasn't the answer, and Naruto's words, spoken not long ago while remembering Nagato, convinced him of this. Uzumaki was always right, damn it. But for some reason, most people simply didn't listen to him, considering him a monster who could destroy the village. Meanwhile, Uzumaki shared all the pain and hatred, smiling so brightly and childishly, as if he didn't understand anything. He'd known since childhood that all those hateful glances were aimed at him. He only didn't know the truth for a long time, but that only made him stronger. He feared nothing, and no one except the loneliness that always haunted him. And if not for Iruka, there might never have been the Naruto Uzumaki of today, but a guy who takes revenge and hates everyone. Sasuke didn't want this fate. "You want to take it to that temple?" The sensei frowned, understanding his student more and more. "Yes, I want to save him, even if I have to die. I'm ready to give my life for him, because without him, I have nothing to do here." The brunette looks back confidently, clenching his fists tighter. "But you understand that Naruto is against this? He doesn't want to sacrifice either you or me." The man sighs, turning back to the fire he'd already started. "I know." He rubbed his neck with his hand, lowering his head a little, trying to come up with a plan. "I have to do this alone. Then he won't hate you. But what about you? You'll get what he gives you. He doesn't want to lose you, so at the first sign of danger, he'll try to save you." The brunette shrugs, turning his gaze to the fire. "Kakashi, I'm no longer a child who could only think about himself. I can survive all of Naruto's hatred. I have to do this to understand him." The brunette glanced sideways at the blonde, who was sleeping, oblivious to this conversation. "I understand that you don't trust me, but I just want to say one thing. Naruto won't forgive you if you come with us, Because you are dear to him. He guards all his connections and wants to protect you, keeping you from danger. It's stupid, but that's what Dobe is all about. You're right, Sasuke, but you're a missing Nin, and you can't just wander around without the Hokage's permission. I need to get you pardoned, so I should head back to Konoha. But I can't leave you here alone either. That's the dilemma. The copy ninja shrugged. I have an idea you'll like. You can go to the village in peace, but if I break my promise, I'll die. Sasuke grins, remembering Orochimaru's lessons. Kakashi cocked his head to the right in surprise, looking at his former student with amusement. It was a tempting offer, one that promised guarantees. After all, the most important thing now was saving Naruto, so after hearing the conditions and the principle of one technique, Hatake nodded affirmatively, agreeing to the terms. And a few minutes later, they began implementing it. Soon, Kakashi was ready to head back. Quickly packing, the former Umbu member vanished into thin air, trying to get to the village as quickly as possible. He had to hurry before it was truly too late. After all, Naruto had managed to change Sasuke, which was only good news. Finally, the boy was thinking not only about himself and his strength, but about someone else. Kakashi had no doubt that the feeling the Uchiha felt for the blonde was love. It was too obvious. Although the slightly stupid Naruto didn't notice, or perhaps didn't even try. The most important thing now was that Uzumaki would survive, because the missing Nin wouldn't let his future and his feelings die. Naruto was always the key to victory. Naruto was the one who needed to be protected, because the future of the entire world depended on him. Meanwhile, Sasuke rose from the ground, moving closer to his partner and sitting down next to him. Resting his head on his friend's shoulder, the Uchiha listened, trying to detect his heartbeat. Having confirmed that it was still beating, he closed his eyes and fell asleep, knowing no one would disturb them today. The clones would alert them if an enemy attempted an attack. Dobe, you understand that now I won't let you go anywhere were Sasuke's last words before he fell asleep. There are now two of them Commentary on there are now two of them. I hope you like this part. I'm waiting for your comments and ratings. And yes, I'm a bad author, since I drag out the chapters so much. Forgive me, the center equals straight face equals. Naruto exhaled through his mouth, waking up. Pain tore through his chest, and the blonde couldn't breathe freely. Wincing, the Jinchuriki glanced to the right, observing his friend. Sasuke was still asleep, his arms wrapped around the Uzumaki. They'd somehow managed to fall to the ground, and now the brunette was hugging Naruto, as if shielding him from others. This would have been the case if Sasuke had an aura he could release at the right moment, but he didn't. Although what Orochimaru taught him remains to be seen. That slimy fellow could have taught the Uchiha a lot, something suited to the parameters of his new body. Carefully pulling first one arm, then the other, Uzumaki rose, though awkwardly, and a sharp pain shot through his back. He still couldn't feel his legs. He winced in pain, but continued to rise, only to lean against the tree trunk Uchiha had placed him under yesterday. He had to decide what he could do in this situation. Give up? That would be easy, but Sasuke, determined to show compassion for his friend, wouldn't let him. Naruto was already cringing at the glances Uchiha and Hatake were throwing his way. It was humiliating, because Naruto had never given up, even as a child. He didn't know why the village despised him so much, but he continued to smile at everyone and pull pranks to attract the villagers' attention. These were only moments, but Uzumaki felt happy, because then he didn't feel the loneliness that followed him everywhere. Even now, that devil had grabbed him by the throat and wouldn't let go, intending to take him with her into oblivion. And death followed, smiling ominously, knowing what a tasty morsel it could snatch if it took the blonde with it. Naruto agreed with him now that all he could do was await his end, relaxing in the grip of loneliness and stretching out his hands to death, willing to give himself up without any desires. Dreams, however, might remain unrealizable, passing on to those who can make them come true. All he had to do was convey his will, his desire, and someone would respond to it, take it as an idea, and bring it to life. Trying to take a deep breath, Naruto coughed, feeling pain in every moving part of his body. Covering his mouth with his hand, Uzumaki tried to muffle the sound so as not to wake Sasuke. But the coughing wouldn't stop, and a metallic taste began to linger in his mouth. Raising an eyebrow in surprise, the Jinchuriki removed his hand and looked at it. His palm was covered in blood, which trickled down his fingers and dripped onto the ground. Naruto was horrified. This was truly bad. Tilting his head toward his friend, he was met with a searing gaze from his dark eyes. The Uchiha looked at Uzumaki's face in confusion, noticing the traces of blood, and then turned his gaze to his friend's hand, rousing himself and sitting down next to him. He looked at Naruto with such concern that the blonde actually flinched at his gaze. This was the first time Uzumaki had seen such a wide range of emotions in the Uchiha, and it was unfamiliar and alien. "Naruto?" The brunette's voice trembled slightly, but his gaze spoke volumes, asking how the blood appeared and what happened. Naruto merely snorted at this concern and wiped the blood on his windbreaker, using his sleeve to brush it from his lips. He wasn't about to explain anything, as his personal hen would only start keeping an even closer eye on him, and he'd never needed care. The time had passed when he'd ever wanted to be needed by anyone. Now it was too late to look for someone who could extract the desire to be needed from him. Even the Uchiha couldn't do it, because Naruto had hidden it deep inside, where the fox guarded the entrance well, knowing his Biju's desire. Incidentally, Kurama wasn't such a jerk, since it so zealously protected its host, even though it knew Naruto had little time left. It didn't offer sympathy, but only wished to be a wall of protection for this fragile keeper for now. And there was no sympathy in his actions, only concern. It was pleasant. Naruto could only wish for the fox to stay with him until the end, but he knew that then Kurama would die with him. The boy didn't want this, so he promised to let him go without any wishes or promises in return. If he wanted revenge on Konoha, that was his right. "Where's Kakashi-sensei?" Naruto changed the subject, looking around the clearing. He wasn't about to talk to Sasuke about things that only concerned missing Nin. "Sasuke? What did you do to him?" He frowned, trying to figure out what was going on. "Naruto." Uchiha drawled out the last syllable, dissatisfied with the fact that he had not received an answer. He had already regained his indifference, pulling on his familiar mask, and was only staring intently at his friend, trying to discern from his gaze what he was hiding or unwilling to say. But the Jinchuriki's eyes remained silent, calmer. Naruto had changed instantly, ceasing to be flighty and idiotic. He seemed to have aged a few years, aware of himself and his situation. This was too much, even for the Uchiha. He longed to see his friend's playful smile again, to hear words that spoke volumes, like the dream of becoming Hokage, like the desire to save him, a friend who had sunk too far into darkness that hatred had become his best companion. "You didn't answer my question." Sasuke looks down at the sweater, staring at the bloody trail. "Are you unwell? And why didn't you wake me?" The brunette frowns, refusing to accept the fact that Uzumaki isn't going to open up to him. They're connected, after all, and what binds them can't be closed. "These are just symptoms of my illness, so don't make a tragedy out of it, Uchiha." The blonde snaps angrily, turning away from his friend's stubborn gaze. "Where is Kakashi-sensei?" "He went to Konoha to inform the Hokage that you and I are going to that temple," the missing Nin stated, noticing how Uzumaki's brows drew together and his lips pressed into a thin line. It was clear he didn't like the idea, but then everything had already been decided without his involvement. "You forgot to ask me." The boy hisses angrily, throwing off the blanket Sasuke threw over him yesterday. "I'm not going to change anything, and you should go, damn it, wherever you were going. I, as an obstacle for you, stopped hindering you, clearing the way. Leave me alone already." I don't want help. The blonde croaks, clenching his hands into fists, continuing to glare angrily at his friend's face. He doesn't even look him in the eye. He doesn't want to. Naruto, you still don't understand. Sasuke Uzumaki's face grabbed confidently, lifted it, and looked at it long and carefully, continuing. I can't let you go, just as you can't let me go. Our connection won't break, and I, like you, will walk along it, sensing the moment when your other half will feel so terrible that you want to tear your own throat out just so this cycle of pain would stop and your other half could live in peace. I feel your pain, just as you felt mine when you tried to bring me back to the village. He exhaled and finished his thought. I haven't fully figured it out yet, but I've definitely begun to understand our connection now. Even now, I can tell that you're in pain and feel lonely. Well, I feel the same way now, but to a lesser extent. What the hell, Databeo? Team, are you overheated? Naruto is surprised that Sasuke has started to feel their connection, since it was always one-sided. What has changed in all this time? You severed our connection back then, and I was just trying to hold it in my hands, holding both ends. I don't need your help or your sympathy. I'm not a child, and I can handle my problems on my own. It has always been this way, and will be for the rest of my life. Naruto yanks his face out of the grip, feeling nauseous and dizzy. He hesitantly tries to crawl away, intending to somehow return home. His best option is to summon the toad, though his mind lingers on the desire to open the cage Kurama is in. He has the key, all that remains is to open the cage, releasing the fox. Uzumaki wouldn't even mind if the Kyuubi took over his mind. He would retreat and allow the beast to exist as a vessel. Turning and propping himself up on his elbows, Naruto bit his finger and began to perform hand seals, but his hand was grabbed, forced to rise slightly higher. Uzumaki glared at his best friend and choked on air. Sasuke's cold gaze forced him to freeze and stare only at him. It was chilling. Taking a sharp breath, the Jinchuriki tried to compose himself, but hearing Sasuke's words only made him even more confused. Naruto, you're not going anywhere. You and I are heading to the temple right now. You can shove a fox up your ass with your complaints. I won't let you die. You are mine. Do you hear me? A smirk appeared on his thin lips, and Sasuke stood up. The Uchiha leaned over, scooping up his silent friend in his arms,